Hey everyone, and welcome. So every single year, we hear this one big word thrown around: budget. Sounds kind of complicated, right? A little intimidating? Well, what if I told you it's actually just like your monthly household budget, but, for the entire country? Stick with me, because in the next few minutes, we're going to break it all down and figure out what the union budget really means for you and me. All right, but before we dive in, let me ask you a simple question. Have you ever wondered who pays for, everything in our country? The roads we drive on, the salaries for government employees, our national defense. I mean, where does all that money even come from? And who gets to decide how it's all spent? Well, the answer to all of those questions is right here, in one single document, the union budget. Okay, so let's get right into it and start with the absolute basics. What exactly is the government's budget? And don't worry, I promise, we're going to keep this super simple. I want you to think of it just like your own household budget. Seriously, your salary comes in, right? That's your income. And then you spend it on things like rent, groceries, maybe some travel, and hopefully you save a little bit. That's all expenditure. Well, the union budget is exactly the same thing, just, on a gigantic scale for the whole country. It's basically a detailed plan of all the money the government expects to get and all the money it plans to spend over one full year. So a big question is, where does the government actually keep all this money? I mean, it's not like they have a giant wallet, right? Well, just like you might have a savings account and a checking account, the government has three main funds or accounts to manage all of the country's finances. Okay, the first and by far the most important one is the Consolidated Fund of India. You can think of this as the main treasury of the country, the big one. Pretty much all the money the government earns, like the taxes we pay, any profits it makes, and even loans it takes, all of it goes into this single fund. And almost every single rupee it spends comes out of this fund. But here's the crucial part. The government can't just take money out whenever it wants. It needs the parliament's approval to withdraw even 1 rupee from this account.
So what happens in an emergency? That's where the contingency fund comes in. Just like the name says, this is the government's emergency fund. Think of it as a backup for those totally unexpected crises, like a natural disaster, a flood, or an earthquake. It's got about 30,000 crore rupees set aside, and it's basically handed over to the President of India to use for any urgent, unforeseen expenses.
And last but not least, we have the public account. Now, this one is super interesting because the money in this account, it doesn't actually belong to the government. It's our money. Yep, yours and mine. When you contribute to your Provident Fund or PF or put money into small savings schemes, it all goes here. The government is basically just acting like a banker, holding on to our money for us. And because it's our money, they don't need Parliament's permission to give it back to us. All right, so now we know where the money is kept. Let's move on and talk about how the government actually spends it. And it's not quite as simple as just one big pile of expenses. There are actually two very different types. Okay, so on one side, you have what's called revenue expenditure. Just think of these as the daily running costs for the government, kind of like our monthly bills, groceries, and rent. This is money spent on things like salaries, pensions, and subsidies. It's the spending that literally keeps the lights on and the country running day to day. But then, on the other side, you have capital expenditure. This is the big stuff. This is the government's investment in our future, like when we save up to buy a house. This spending creates long-term assets for the whole country. We're talking new roads, hospitals, schools, and factories. This is the spending that truly builds the nation. So we've covered the how of the budget, the accounts and the types of spending, but a budget isn't just a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet. It's really about a vision for the future. So what is the big picture here? What's the grand plan the government is trying to achieve with all of this?
Well, the big vision has a name, Viksit Bharat. And the goal is simple but ambitious, to make India a developed nation. But what does that really mean? It's not just about having a powerful economy. The real goal here is inclusive growth. That's a fancy term for making sure that as the country grows and gets richer, everyone benefits. We're talking about everyone, from a farmer in a tiny village to a software engineer in a big city.
Now, to achieve a huge dream like that, you need a plan, right? You need a set of rules. Think of this as the government's playbook. The main goals are to keep the economy growing at a good, steady pace, keep a lid on rising prices, or mehengai, and to spend money wisely without racking up a ton of debt. It's all about building a super strong and stable foundation for the future. And a really key part of this whole plan is hitting a high growth rate. We're talking a target of around 7%. Now, I know 7% might just sound like a random number, But what it really means is that the economy is growing fast. And a fast-growing economy is what creates more jobs, better opportunities, and, at the end of the day, a better standard of living for all of us.
Okay, so this big vision of a developed India sounds great, right? But how does it actually happen? Where is the government putting its focus? And more importantly, its money? Let's get into the specifics and break down the key focus areas.
One of the biggest areas of focus is manufacturing. You've heard of the Made in India campaign, right? Well, this is about putting that into overdrive. The idea is simple. When we make more things right here on our own country, it creates millions of jobs, especially for young people. And it makes India more self-reliant, or Atmanirbhar. This is a direct line back to that big goal of inclusive growth we were just talking about.
And listen, this isn't just a catchy slogan. The budget actually lays out very specific plans to make this happen. We're talking about things like the India Semiconductor Mission. That's about making computer chips right here in India. There are plans for new, dedicated chemical parks, a scheme for manufacturing containers, and a big push to revive old industrial areas. It's a really comprehensive strategy to try and turn India into a global manufacturing powerhouse. The budget also puts a huge spotlight on MSMEs. That stands for micro, small, and medium enterprises. Basically, the small and medium-sized businesses that are the real backbone of our economy. And there's a clear three-step approach to help them out. First, equity support, which is funds to help them grow bigger. Second, liquidity support, making it easier for them to get cash for their day-to-day operations. And third, professional support, which is help with all the complicated rules and regulations. At the end of the day, stronger local businesses mean stronger local economies.
Another really exciting focus area is tourism and culture. The plan is to take 15 major archaeological sites and develop them into world-class destinations. And to support that, they're going to train thousands of new tourist guides. You know, this isn't just about bringing in money, it's about showing off India's incredible, rich heritage to the world. And it's not just historical sites. It also includes our natural heritage, with plans to host the first-ever global Big Cat Summit. How cool is that?
Whew. Okay, that was a lot of information, I know. But you stuck with it. So just to make sure all the important stuff really sinks in, let's do a super quick recap of the main points.
Okay, first up, we learned the union budget is just the country's annual financial plan, a simple list of its income and expenses. Second, we saw the government's money is managed in three main accounts. The main one, the consolidated fund, the emergency one, the contingency fund, and the one that holds our money, the public account. Third, we broke down government spending into two types, the daily running costs, which is revenue, and the future building investments, called capital. And finally, the whole thing is driven by one big vision, Viksit Bharat, the goal of making India a developed and inclusive nation.
So I'm going to leave you with one final question to think about. Now that you understand the basics, how do you think this budget is actually going to change things for you personally? It's easy to think of it as some big, distant government document, but its effects are literally all around us. That big push for manufacturing, that could mean a new job opportunity for someone you know. That support for small businesses, that could help your local shop thrive. See, the budget sets the entire direction for the country, and sooner or later, that direction impacts every single one of us. It's something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me today.